Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Rangers Review morning briefing. It's the morning after the night before, as Rangers are dumped out of the Champions League at the third round qualifying stage against Malmo. A disappointing 2-1 defeat at Ibrox last night to go out 4-2 on aggregate. I'm Derek Clark. I'm joined by Jonny McFarlane and Joshua Barrie, who was at Ibrox last night. We'll start with you, Joshua. It looked quite incredible the first half, especially, particularly when Alfredo Morelos scored. The atmosphere was sensational, and then it all went wrong after halftime.
Yeah, it was, and it really had everything. At halftime, Rangers were in an excellent position. The noise was genuinely incredible. Obviously, we spoke before about the potential it had as a European night to go down in history, and everything was going right. Rangers were pinning Malmo in. Malmo had a small period of pressure just before half-time, but then with the red card going in at half-time, everything pointed towards Rangers winning, and there was a lot of palpable disappointment come 60 minutes because, again, and I'm sure we'll touch on this, over the duration of the two ties, I think it's 7 minutes, we conceded 4 goals. And when you have those such shaky periods of time in a football match, I guess it doesn't really matter, as Gerrard said himself, what you do with the rest of it. And in the first half, I thought the balance of the team was good. Joe Aribo had an excellent first half, a really, really excellent first half. Malmo were struck really for the first 35 minutes, couldn't really form any sort of attack themselves. And again, the disappointing thing was, even when we went 2-1 down, there were still plenty of chances, but the team were a very different team in that second half. And I think everyone leaving Ibrox thought that is a real missed opportunity. And I think that's probably the main frustration for all the supporters and players and manager alike.
Jonny, we of course do our predicted lineups before games. What did you make of the actual lineup? You picked Balogun in front of Helander. There's a lot of debate whether that was the right call to make. In the main, what did you make of that starting lineup?
Yeah, well, I thought it was a little surprising that he went for Scott Wright, but I thought Scott Wright played okay. I would have played Yanis Hadji in there, and I think all three of us went for a triumvirate of Hadji, Kent and Morelos. But Jay, I can totally understand why he did play Balogun. I mean, Balogun has got recovery pace that Helander doesn't have. And if the idea is that you're going to go and attack and press really high up the park and suffocate the life out of a team, the chances they're going to hit you on the counter-attack. And if that's the case, you've got to need a central defender who's able to eat up ground quickly and nip in and solve problems. So I can totally understand why Balogun started. But at the same time, post-match, with hindsight, you also say, I can understand the criticism because Balogun had a really poor second half. He was terrific in the first half. But second half, you know, he had a bit of a nightmare. He's always a bit shaky when he comes out with the ball. We know that about him. He's one of these players that just needs to give it as soon as he gets it. But the second goal is 100% Liam Balogun's fault. There's other issues structurally in that second goal, but he gets far too tight to Kolak and then not tight enough. He's been done there by a bit of skill. Joe Aribo obviously doesn't help. And I'm going to rephrase that. 100% is wrong. It's about 90% because Joe Aribo, I think, should hold his position rather rushing in and sort of getting in the way. I don't know what Joshua thinks of that. You're a tactics guru. What do you think of that second goal, mate?
Well, I think more widely you look at what Malmo did, and they knew they were going to have limited opportunities, and they knew that their periods of pressure around the box were going to be limited because they're a man down. So they made the most of throw-ins, and I think for both goals they sucked Rangers in with throw-in routines and created space really intelligently but really simply. And it shows you how advantageous throw-ins can be in these types of areas because you can isolate players one-on-one. And I thought what they tried to do with both of those routines was isolate Čolak with Balogun. Now, in the first leg, as you've just mentioned, Jonny, Gerrard heaped praise on Helander. He said it was a Champions League level performance, and Čolak didn't get. You didn't see as much of him because Helander was one-on-one with him, was tight at the right moments, was not too tight at other moments, and kept him quiet. So the frustration is that again, hindsight's a wonderful thing. Balogun helped us squeeze up in the first half. That leads to pressure for the goal, etc., etc. But I don't think those goals happen if it's Helander one-on-one. I don't think he gets turned so easily. You look at how intelligently he uses his body. So again, it's really easy to look at it and pick it apart and think this should have happened, that should have happened. For the second goal as well, Goldson's run across is a little bit peculiar. But I think what you've seen was a team take advantage of those small moments in and around the box, and you've seen Rangers be fooled pretty easily by a couple of routines. So that's disappointing. We've not seen too many basic defensive errors last season, and this season there's been a good few already leading to goals. So that's something that Gerrard and co I'm sure will be looking at already this morning.
Here's my tuppence worth with regards to that. Helander is the best defender at Rangers. He should be playing every game. I mean, he's head and shoulders above Balogun. He's better than Goldson in current form. Goldson, for me, I'm not too sure what's up with him. I know he came out after the game and says that they're a different side to the side that ended last season. I don't know if it's a mentality issue, but he just doesn't look the same player as we've seen last season, Connor Goldson. And I'm not too sure. What can you put your finger on what that could be, Jonny? I know he's contract issues in the background there, but he just doesn't look the same sort of Connor Goldson we've seen last season.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting an interview he gave to the club media where he said, if I thought about this contract stuff, it would distract me. I'm leaving it to my agent, and it looks like it's distracting him. And it's all very well saying, I'm trying to ignore it and I'm leaving it with my agent. But if you've got such a huge life decision, not just for you, but for your family, let's remember footballers are humans too, and they have pressures. Then of course that's going to be playing on your mind. Of course you're going to be thinking about it, and of course it's going to mean that you've not got 100% focus. Now a footballer might be listening to this and say that's just not how it works. None of us have been professional footballers. But listen, some of us are old enough in the tooth to remember one of the greatest Rangers of all time, Brian Laudrup. And, he was a guy that performed at a magisterial level throughout his Rangers career. But he wanted to go with a year left to go on his contract. They decided to keep him. And he just didn't perform. He couldn't put it all together. And, if that's a struggle for him, then it's going to be a struggle for players with less talent. And Goldson has certainly got less talent than Brian. So I think it's something that needs resolved fairly quickly. It looks like Rangers are fairly comfortable with the situation, and it looks like it's progressing. But it's something that they'll want to get sorted out sooner rather than later. I personally think Goldson is one that they absolutely want to keep. He's been terrific. I wondered for a while, given his age and his probable the demand for him probably from England, given he would be a homegrown player and he's performed so well at such a high level, it would mean that it might be a good idea to move him on. But I just think he's so imperative to that entire Rangers back line that they need to sort something out with him now. And he's such a vocal presence in that team. But I think you're right now, Derek. I think you've called it right with Helander. Rangers last year obviously rotated that back four in terms of the two central defenders, not the wide players, obviously. But it was Goldson and Ian Other, and that was always changing depending on the game. But I think given where Rangers are at now, after 3 defeats in a row, it would be advisable to say, right, it's going to be Goldson and Helander for the next 3 or 4 games. We're going to give them a crack at it and a run at it, because defensively, those two give us the most. And I think you're spot on with that. Helander is the best pure defender. He has that Serie A mentality of blocking players out. He's got the defensive nous down to a T. And I think they need to get back to basics with that and get Helander back in the team.
Yeah, just finishing on Goldson, Joshua, he was part of an incident just before half-time where Bonke Innocent gets sent off. It looked rather harsh, to say the least. What was your view of it, sat close by?
Sat close by, my view of it was... I thought it was a red card, and then I watched it back, and then it wasn't a red card. So pretty classic in terms of watching a football game. Your first instinct is wrong. I think that I don't know if Goldson preempted contact I don't know. I think Innocent's reaction, and there was plenty of puns flying around which got tiresome about 5 minutes into halftime. But I think his reaction told you everything. And obviously, your bias aside, you don't want to see a player sent off when he's not done anything to merit it. But I actually think Goldson went in probably was a little bit higher, if my memory serves me correctly, watching it back. But God, these things happen. I'm sure you tweeted out that evens up. What was it? The Bagheera red card you tweeted out?
10 years ago.
And have a laugh about it. But yeah, I think everyone just thought there's 10 men. There's the little break, but it wasn't to be.
Yeah, but listen, it galvanised Malmo, Jonny, didn't it? I mean, fair credit to them. It's almost like a siege mentality to them. John Dahl Thomason deserves great credit for me for sort of rousing the troops. And just before that red card, they were getting the better of the play, I felt. And from then on, looked comfortable that second half.
Yeah, I think Malmo are a little bit better than probably what we gave them credit for.
Yeah.
I thought tactically they were really, really smart. They used the switch of play, which is basically the way to get at Rangers, very, very well across both legs, especially the first leg. But there was evidence of it again last night, and using their full-backs or their wing-backs to push right up and cause problems. Ultimately they were very, very. They scored goals at the right times. They took their chances. They were clinical, and ultimately that's going to be enough to put Rangers out at the moment, unfortunately, because of the level of performance that we're seeing in these last few games. But honestly, don't think Malmo are a better side man for man than Rangers. I really don't. This Rangers team are clearly underperforming in sections of games. Now, you saw in the first 35 minutes or so that Rangers at their best, and they were at their best for that period. There's a distance between them and Malmo. They absolutely battered Malmo. But they had that mad spell in the second half. That just you really can't explain why they would lose the plot in that way, especially in that second goal. It's just so unlike them. So, it's credit goes to Malmo and John Dahl Thomason. I thought they defended really well. They were very, very well organised. They sat back in the low block in the second half and didn't really look like they were going to come under too much pressure, given that their central defenders are big guys who are comfortable heading out crosses, and that seemed to be Rangers' plan of attack, was to swing balls in. I don't know exactly how many balls were swung in. I've not seen the data yet, but I think it would have been a lot.
38 crosses. 38.
Yeah, 38 crosses. So that's kind of like that's we've seen that kind of number before in certain games, haven't we? When it hasn't worked for Rangers. So yeah, I mean, well done to Malmo, but ultimately, I don't think Rangers should have fallen at this hurdle. And it's even more, Derek, it's even more frustrating when you see that Ludogorets got through, and it would have been 2 legs against Ludogorets to go into the Champions League. I mean, you'd have fancied your chances in those guys.
Yeah. Josh, you mentioned 38 crosses. Got to be honest, the deliveries were poor, to say the least. Borna Barisic, for me, it's like Goldson. He's not the same player. I don't know what's up with him. I don't know if it's a mentality issue, but he's not the level we've seen last season. James Tavernier had a pretty off night as well on the right-hand side, and if those two aren't firing, you're in trouble.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's 2 things. I think first, I mean, personally, 3 defeats, as we know, 2 defeats to catastrophe in either Old Firm club. 3 defeats is even more so. I think that the players have shown more than enough to be given be allowed an off week without too many major questions, but inevitably that's going to happen. Gerrard said himself, he smirked and he said the noise and the criticism will be there, and he's obviously not going to focus on it, but he knows that. But that's just my personal opinion. I didn't think they were great. I thought Tavernier did have a performance where certainly in the first half he kind of overhit a few passes and you thought he wasn't at his best, and maybe he was playing the occasion a wee bit too much. But Gerard said post match we didn't play through enough, and I think that was true. I think what we was watching back some of the first half this morning, and there's a moment about 47, 48 minutes where Kent's already taking the ball off the centre backs, and we know that Kent plays infield in this system, but I just think that we didn't press the issue enough. We didn't ask enough questions infield. We played where it was comfortable for Malmo. And I think what would often happen is, and I think in saying that, I don't think Tavernier had a lot of options down the right when he was moving forward, and him and Goldson both tried to move the team up the pitch, but I don't think there was enough options. I think Morelos really tired. You could see that in the second half. He wasn't the first half performance we'd come to expect, and it maybe did beg the question that Etienne would have given a little more of a focal point, even just to play off, because naturally when Malmo sit in spaces at premium, and it's hard to make inroads infield because that's where they're blocking. But bringing on Sakala and not Etienne, although Sakala I think did okay, was a little bit peculiar. So yeah, Barisic in the first half I thought had a decent half as well, and but as the game wore on, he took a few poor touches and again tired. So yeah, again, I mean, you hope with these players that it's not it just takes him a good performance. Gerard again spoke post match. You'll go and speak to his leaders and hope that they can lift the team. And
there's one thing I'd like to just throw in here, which is about the nature of the midfield. Now, all the way through Gerrard's tenure, arguably the two most important roles defensively are the left side of the central midfield and the right side of the central midfield, because of the importance Gerrard places on getting those fullbacks pushed right up. So they have an absolute power of tactical work to get through.
Yeah.
And missing out on two players who have been there from pretty much the beginning, and Glenn Kamara, I think, came in after 6 months, and Ryan Jack, you are missing a lot of defensive nous, and their knowledge of the system. They've played it so much that it's totally ingrained and natural to them. So to be missing both of them, I think slightly imbalances Rangers, and that might be the biggest aspect of this defensive malfunction that we're seeing, because Scott Arfield's definitely more attacking. Joe Aribo is definitely more attacking. They're not natural defensive midfield players. Like, you see this across the city with Celtic and Callum McGregor when he's up against better opposition. He just doesn't have the natural defensive nous to pick up runners in behind them, because it's just not his game. And it's the same with these two. Whereas Jack and Kamara are much more naturally gifted in terms of sniffing out danger. And I think that's been a huge aspect that Rangers have struggled to replicate without those two. And John Lundstrom just in the door, and the amount of tactical information he's got to process, as well as dealing with moving to a new city, as well as dealing with all the added pressure and all the added scrutiny that comes with being a Rangers player. So I don't know what you think, guys, but I think that midfield, it's the core of this issue is probably the midfield.
Yeah, Kamara for me is a huge loss. Him and Ruth, these qualifiers, we knew that Rangers would miss him when they were given those suspensions, and it's transpired to be the case. So massive miss. I'm hearing a lot of talk now where people are questioning the recruitment and not getting maybe players in to try and get through these qualifiers. It hasn't happened. In saying that, I mean, you've brought John Lundstrom in from the Premier League quality player. He's not hit the ground running. It's going to take him time, like you say, Jonny, but he's a good player. I'm not having him being written off after so early. Fashion Sakala, by all accounts, is a decent player, but do you think maybe we should have added one or two more just to make sure that they get through these Champions League qualifiers?
No, I don't. I think they've done really well in the transfer market. They've done it the way they should have done it, which is high quality free transfers, because Rangers aren't made the money. You know, the club's making losses and they know they have a player trading strategy. High quality players for nothing, and players that were brought in last January who are now into the system and integrated properly so that they can make an impact. The likes of Scott Wright, who you're already seeing make an impact, and Jack Simpson, who the club will hope make an impact. We know there's been issues with another player, but I honestly can't criticise that at the moment. I think they've been smart in the transfer market, and you don't want to be going splashing millions of pounds without knowing which European strata you're in. You know, if Rangers were not to get through to this Europa League, for example, that would be a huge issue for the budget. So you don't want to go and spend 12 million, 30 million on players and then realise that you don't make the Champions League. We've seen Rangers do that in the past. People would be slaughtering the board and saying, well, it's very, very, it's showing a lack of foresight, it's showing carelessness, and it's showing recklessness. So I honestly, I don't know what Joshua thinks. I don't think you can criticise Rangers for their transfer business.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I think it would equally, you could argue that it would be very, as Jonny said, it would be rash to go out and get high quality players that would be able to emulate what Glenn Kamara and Kamara Roof could do just for 2 qualifiers. Players like that cost a lot of money, which is why we're so keen to keep a hold of Glenn Kamara. So yeah, I agree. I think I thought Rebo was great in the first half, balanced out that midfield, but I agree. I think the gaps in between the fullbacks and the centre backs were a little bit too wide. You've seen that with a chance that was flashed just across the face of goal before the 2 goals. I also would have maybe liked to see maybe Kent provide the width and Barisic come in field a little bit so Kent could isolate a player one-on-one just to be a little bit less predictable in their shape. But yeah, an evening of disappointment, certainly, Derek. But I think it's easy in hindsight to say we should have done this, we should have done that. No one a week and a half ago was unhappy, I think, with our transfer model, or very few.
Finally, Jonny, before we wrap up, Dunfermline on Friday night. Huge game for Rangers, going into that off the back of 3 consecutive defeats. They're going to have to wise up and get out of this lull that they're in pronto.
Yeah, well, I would have expected quite a changed Rangers team for that game if they'd gone through, but I
Ideal
think
game,
we're going to be looking at some big hitters lining up against Dunfermline, and quite frankly, they just have to get that game put to bed. It's the first stone, the foundation stone going in to hopefully the run that they'll want to see leads them to another title. So they have to start as they mean to go on and put this period of 3 games behind them. There's just no other way for it. I mean, Steven Gerrard has to do what he said last night, which is getting about his senior players, find out what's been going on, where they think the problems lie, and start to address it. But I would just say there's going to be a lot of hysterical reaction to this result. And it's understandable because Rangers are not a club that is used to losing 3 games on the spin. But it's very, very early in the season, and this is a team that went unbeaten last year, and that can't be stressed enough. I don't buy this whole argument about Rangers struggle with crowds. They didn't struggle for the first half last night, did they? They didn't struggle against Braga when the crowd was on top of them, and they were 2-0 down, and they came back and won 3-2. They didn't struggle in the December 2019 game when Ryan Jack scored and they beat Brendan Rodgers Celtic. You know, I just think it's an easy thing to reach for, this whole crowd argument. Like Joshua used the stats to sort of pull it apart yesterday on the website, and I'd encourage anyone to go and read that who's getting a bit fed up with this crowd stuff. I just don't believe it. The problem is that it can become a self-fulfilling prophecy because everyone's saying it, and then it starts annoying the players, and then it starts to become something that is actually there. But at the moment, as it stands, I don't feel like there's much evidence beyond empirical sort of opinion on the issue of crowds. I think the Rangers have got some structural issues that they've had in the defence that we've discussed, and there's maybe been a few players who have gone off the boil a little bit in forward areas, like Ryan Kent. So I think it'll just naturally iron itself out. I don't think Rangers are going to lose 4 in a row. I think they'll beat Dunfermline, and I think things will start to click into place. But there's no doubt that the pressure is now on, and Steven Gerrard has to get the players back at it and delivering, because that Celtic game is coming thick and fast, isn't it?
Absolutely is. We'll leave it there, gents. Thanks to everyone getting in touch on the socials. Thanks to Jonny and Joshua. We've got a load of great content on the website, rangersreview.co.uk. Remember to subscribe as well. It's only £1 a month for the first 6 months. So go and support top quality journalism covering the club you love. We'll be back tomorrow for another morning briefing, but until then, enjoy the rest of your Wednesday.